Hey, this is Kyle and Adam at ProjectionHub, and we are back with another edition of SBA Burning Questions, where people who are starting businesses, buying businesses, growing businesses have questions about how to go about those processes, and especially how to navigate kind of the SBA loan application process as it pertains to their business. So both Adam and I come from an SBA lending background. I was an SBA loan officer. Adam was an executive director of an SBA lender. And so I'm going to ask Adam a question, and he's going to give us his sage wisdom here. And so today's question is actually a recent Reddit post. I think maybe in this question, it's not explicitly stated that they are applying for an SBA loan, but the fact that they are like the nature of their question would probably imply that SBA is going to be the route that's going to be financing a pretty good chunk of this. So we'll try to help out on both sides of that here. So first time buyer, should I acquire a declining business or start from scratch? Looking for an experienced input for those who have serviced acquired small businesses. Evaluating my first acquisition in the pet care space. One LOI I submitted was not accepted. There's another opportunity available, but revenue and SD have declined over the past 2-3 years. This would be a structured and asset sale. The real estate is leased. The current owner built out the facility. So there's value in the existing infrastructure. Revenue has trended downward year over year, and SDE has compressed accordingly. On paper, it looks like a potential turnaround rather than a stable cash flowing acquisition. I work full time in the business. I have access to financing, but want to be conservative with leverage. My background is in demand generation and marketing, and I have not run a turnaround before. I'm weighing two options: acquire this declining business at a disciplined price and attempt to turn it around, or start my own facility and control branding, price, and positioning from day one. My primary concern is capital allocation. For those who have done acquisitions, how risky is the declining service business for first-time operator? Are the turnarounds more difficult than they appear in the local small business? So I guess from our standpoint, we'll probably answer the question about something to keep in mind that they didn't ask is like, how will they even like fund this? Like, is the declining business even something they could get financed? Like, let's assume they don't just have cash sitting around to buy it or start it, and they're going to need to borrow money. But that's the setup. Let's get your take.
Yeah, this is an interesting one. I think short answer is I would probably try to buy this versus start from scratch, because I think it seems like it's all about customer acquisition in this business. So if you're starting with a head start with some customers, I think that's probably worth it in this type of business. And they said their experience is demand generation and marketing, right? So it sounds like their experience is well suited to like solve what looks to be the problem here. Is just, if revenue's declining, sounds like they need more customers, but they have some customers. And if you start from scratch, you have no customers. So they also have it built out. Now, I do think my hunch here is that if you could get a loan from an SBA lender to start a new facility with 0 customers, then you could get a loan to acquire this business at the right price. They're probably going to, in both situations, the lender's probably going to be looking at your personal financial situation, your experience pretty heavily, because it looks like they probably can't rely on the business too much. I think, yeah, they're going to look at your outside income, how much down payment you're putting in, and your experience. So as long as the location and the brand isn't terrible, then it seems like this would give you a head start and is probably worth something at the right price. If it would cost you, let's say it cost you $250,000 to start this on your own, or, if the seller thinks they want $500,000, then, I might think about it. But if the loan amount ends up being roughly the same, any head start is probably useful.
So I wrote down a couple of quick questions. And first is like, an obvious big thing about this is like they say acquire the declining business. Like, we don't know how much it's declining, or like we don't know like how badly it's performing. So that's probably a big question mark, is like how bad are we talking? For it could be bad enough that a lender would be like, yeah, no thanks. There's no way we're going to get comfortable, like if it's going to cash flow or something like that, like you said, depending upon the asking price. So that's probably the first big point. Secondly, a question for you is, how is the leasehold improvement handled in this type of deal? Because probably depends on how they're valuing the business, but I guess from my understanding, like what the seller had originally invested to like get this built out, or maybe the landlord did that. Like, we don't really know how much was invested and who forked that over. But when it comes to the resale of a business that is in a specifically built out space for their business, does the seller get to try to recapture any of that in the asking price? Or could that be another potential like bonus point for the buyers because, it's a purpose-made space and that's not going to show up in the sales price because maybe the landlord's the one that did that, or is that an acceptable thing to try to recoup in a sales price? So do you have any thoughts on how that would play into this?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a real cost and a real headache if you're trying to do a startup, and build out on your own. So like, I think there's some value there. You'll need to negotiate with the landlord though to get a new lease in place that will match the length of the term of the SBA loan. So if typically it's a 10-year term for a SBA acquisition loan. So you're going to need to get at least the option to lease that space from the landlord for the next 10 years. So that could potentially be a challenge. It also may be that in order for you to get the landlord to agree to that, they may say, hey, we're going to raise your rent. And so you may want to kind of then back that out of the purchase price even more, like, hey, this business going forward is going to make even less money than it does now because I'm gonna have to pay more in rent. So I think it is valuable. It saves you time. You're already set up, and it could be worth something versus doing it from scratch. So I think the seller should ask, but ultimately they don't control it, and the landlord could really screw that up if the landlord's like doesn't really want them there anymore. The landlord's, I'm not signing a new lease, or I'll only sign a new lease, but I'm gonna triple the rent. There's no value there.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's no value. The landlord kind of controls that.
Right. You would think, I mean, instead of pet care space, like in theory, it could be used for other things, but if it is a relatively purpose-built space, probably think the landlord is incentivized to try and like get the next, it lessens their pool of people. If like they need another pet care business to be in there and they have one served up right there, they would probably want to continue it with you. I guess it depends on how their experience with the previous tenant had been. But yeah, that is kind of an interesting component of like maybe don't know like who paid for the build out, because if like that was the seller, I don't know that they could really make a case to, I guess maybe it depends on how valuable that is, right? That could be an asset as a part of the sale. So yeah, this is an interesting one. Not knowing the specific numbers, I think starting from something is it's almost always easier than starting from nothing. One quick little caveat I was going to throw in there too or a thing to think about would be like, what does the reputation of the business look like? So like, does it have 1.7 stars on Google? And, it's going to be a big uphill battle to like really rebuild the reputation of something, or is there another really strong competitor that's come into town and it's really like established itself? So I would say that's probably like, is this a small town and this is the closest one in 15 miles, and like even if it has a bad reputation, it's a no-brainer. So those are the kind of things too that probably play into that, and just the difficulty of turning it around even beyond the financials of the business.
And I think you may then, if it has a bad reputation, then probably what you do is that business shuts down. You buy the assets, but then you just don't use the name. So you start with, you probably buy the customer list, the existing customer list. So you try to keep the customers you have, but you rebrand and, get a new Google My Business, Google My Business profile or whatever.
That's a good point. It does say
that's what you would do.
Structure it as an asset sale. So maybe they're already thinking about that. Yeah. Like all the stuff's there, but I don't want to take on the identity of the business that's already operating.
Yeah. I mean, I think that kind of thing happens all the time. Probably in some situations, it's the exact same owner.
Yeah.
Just a different brand. I think I can remember a time or two with some SBA loans that had gone bad in our portfolio that was like, this business shut down, not paying us back. And then that business looks similar and in the same spot. And is that the same owner?
They haven't changed the truck wrap yet. It's still wrapped with the old business. Yeah. All right. Well, there you have it. Another kind of SBA/acquisition burning question answered. So if you're watching this video and you're out there and you're exploring buying a business and you're trying to kind of figure out like, is this deal worth it, or is this price worth it? Or should I consider starting my own? Something we didn't even talk about either, I think, is the difficulty of getting like an acquisition loan approved versus like a startup loan approved. Like there's some different layers there as well. like, you know, depending upon how the numbers look, but we don't know the numbers in this case. So if you're out there and you're exploring this, especially if you're thinking about SBA, you can check out our free expert SBA review. It's linked down below the video, where you fill that out, give us a little bit more information about your situation, and you will get some free advice from Adam on his recommendations and potential risks to keep in mind and things to look out for. So thanks for watching. Like the video, subscribe so you can see our next one's coming out, and we'll see you in the next one. Thanks.